Electrocast.
This podcast is supported by FX's English Teacher, a new comedy from executive producers of What We Do in the Shadows and Baskets. English Teacher follows Evan, a teacher in Austin, Texas, who learns if it's really possible to be your full self at your job while often finding himself at the intersection of the personal, professional, and political aspects of working at a high school. FX's English Teacher premieres September 2nd on FX. Stream on Hulu.
My dad works in B2B marketing. He came by my school for career day and said he was a big ROAS man. Then he told everyone how much he loved calculating his return on ad spend. My friends still laugh at me to this day.
Not everyone gets B2B, but with LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people who do. Get a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/results to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.
Hold on to your butts.
We are changing the course of history as we see it. That is what Western demands.
Now this affects Iris. Iris, where are you?
What you feel only matters to you. I do not entertain hypotheticals. The world as it is vexing enough.
Iris, I have a tip for you.
Don't take drugs!
Or Whatever Movies with Wesley and Iris.
What up, and welcome to Or Whatever Movies. I'm your co-host, Iris, and I'm here with my older brother,
Wesley.
Today, we're talking a movie from 2016, Hell or High Water. It feels weird to say without, come, hell or high water.
Yep. Not even the original title. Comancheria, original title.
No.
Yep. And apparently this was selected by a group of interns. They had a little contest to rename the movie, and Hell or High Water won. Which isn't a bad title, all things considered. If that ain't texting, I don't know what is.
Was that a quote?
Yeah, that was from the lawyer. See, you pay them bastards back with their own money? Well, that ain't texting, I don't know what is.
That's right. The one who was in on the jig.
Yeah.
Who suggested that the final flourish on Toby's great scheme would be to have Texas Midland then hold the trust and
right.
and have its interest in the oil money that it produced.
And who also advised him to get to the bank on Thursday rather than Friday. And even on Thursday, you know those bastards will close early. He said, come hell or high water, be at the bank Thursday. So we got a lot from that lawyer.
All right, the inevitable has come early in this episode. How is Hell or High Water a Western? And I'm going to ask you questions because when I suggested that we discuss Hell or High Water, you were like, yep, ready for it any time.
Yep.
And always question movies that you're ready for at any time. Like, when was the last time you watched Hell or High Water? How does this fit into your Western canon?
Maybe within the month. I watch this movie fairly regularly. This is kind of a modern classic Western in that way. It is a Western, but it's definitely, despite the fact that Texas feels to me like a little bit behind the times, this movie was 2016. It feels much older. Like they're driving Oldsmobiles and 80s, 90s pickups and stuff. But it is a modern Western where they have digital video cameras. The Texas Midlands is switching over and all that stuff. And
well, that's part of its mystique, right? That it's caught between the old and the new. That Texas's glory days are behind it, as reflected in the debt and the financial burden that everyone appears to be under.
Yep.
Given the billboards that are advertising coming out of it. That's its kind of no country for old men predicament, right? They're caught between the old and the new.
Yes, even though that movie took place in the early 80s. This one takes place in what is presumably the modern day of 2016, but it does retain those old Western themes and tropes. They are outlaws and they are desperados for sure, driven to try to save their family and try to save their land, a la 310 to Yuma and all that stuff. That movie not having the prospect of grand wealth, that they're trying to preserve a thing because the big banks are trying to steal it to get richer. But this movie is different and the lines are blurred, I think, as in most postmodern Westerns where the clear line between good and bad becomes blurry.
I can certainly see that in the Toby character, who is a bank robber, and though Ben Foster is aiding his brother, and we do see some soft spots when they're messing around at sunset and being brotherly and stuff like that, but he's kind of a bad dude. And Jeff Bridges and his partner, Alberto, definitely not bad.
not bad. Jeff Bridges was quite racist in this movie. And while it was fun, you can see that it bothered Gil a little bit, right? When he would like roll over and be, it's getting kind of late. Jeff Bridges wasn't bad. Was he about upstanding and holding up the law and protecting the citizens? He was nice and all to Natalie and the bank and stuff, but was he more interested in preserving his kind of like, what are you going to do when you won't have someone to outsmart and kind of stuff? Was he hanging on? Was he a little bit mean?
I think that's an interesting observation. I mean, it's easy to write off racist jabs, I guess, when you're talking about bank robberies and people getting shot. But it's true. He takes it too far, and Alberto probably allows for it a little bit too much. But he doesn't let up. He's pretty relentless about it.
Yeah. And yet, watching it again, I'm struck by how Alberto, I called him Gil because that's the actor's name, Alberto starts it off. Well, that's not true. He says, why are you wearing the same shirt as me? But he's also like, might have one more adventure before they send you off to the rocking chair or whatever. I think it was meant to suggest that their repartee is on both sides, right? Although Jeff Bridges is much more attuned to the fact that he's half Indian and half Mexican. Half Native American and half Mexican. But he makes the Indian jokes, Indian specifically. And that's kind of what he focuses on, but they definitely go back and forth. And he's like, he even commends him. Yeah, that was good. See, you'll get the hang of this.
He goes both ways. So Alberto is ageist and Marcus Hamilton is racist.
Right.
And that's how, I guess, in the old way, you show affection for one another.
In the old way, that's how dudes show affection for each other.
By just ribbing each other constantly?
Yes. And trying to injure each other's nuts.
It's so weird.
But what I was going to say earlier is that I think one of the keys for this movie as it fits into the Westerns is that it goes a little bit off convention. I keep wanting to say that it, like in kind of a Texas way where it blurs the lines, but I was surprised by the things that Texans do in this movie. And similarly, I don't feel like it was, the old tropes that feel tired or whatever. There was obviously Robin Hood elements, but one of them wasn't named Rob or Robert or anything like that. And the plot was, it took a little while to unfold. It's about as complicated as I like a plot. I don't need intrigue or whatever. I just like a good story and the human elements. But, in lesser hands, it might have been called Robin Your Own Hood or something like that. Something dumb where they really played up the themes and tried to update old stories. It felt distinctly different to me.
It's pretty stereotypical in its Texas setting. All the gun-toting Texans and the 10-gallon hat attitudes and then the finale with, the posse, just the citizen posse steps in. Like the rifle owner doesn't even wants to take the shot even though he knows it's illegal and he'll get busted for it because he's not an officer of the law. Yeah. Well, Jeff Bridges was vouched for him or claimed that he took the shot. Sure. But no way was he not going to let him take the shot. Well, yeah, they were all pretty typical, but I just mean in the execution of this movie. Taylor Sheridan, the writer, is from Texas and knows this area. This is part of his trilogy of not quite Westerns, but American experiences. This along with Wind River and Sicario, all very different movies sharing only a few themes. And Sicario is great in terms of tightness and overall likability, enjoyability. I'm going with Hell or High Water, as great as Sicario is. It's kind of the interplay in how you know what Tanner's up to. You know what his motivations are. You know he's a cowboy for sure. And Toby is a little bit less predictable. And so I think it was the interplay between those two. And as a typical Texas Ranger or whatever, cowboy. But then he has this weird, soft, both of them kind of are typical Texas Rangers. But then their interplay belies, more character development and more thought-provoking elements. Interesting. Maybe because Brother Tanner is just so on his sleeve, so obvious. Yep. Whereas I think unpredictable is an interesting word because he's definitely sticking to the plan, at least best he can, when Tanner tries to mess it up. But what I thought was surprising about him was the showdown between him and Marcus Hamilton at the end. It's a very tense, close exchange that's interrupted by families, or you can see him kind of uncocking the rifle. That dynamic changes very quickly. But still, he's like, you want a beer? Yeah, thank you, and stuff. And it seems friendly when it's anything but. They're kind of going through the motions of pleasantries. Yeah, they're just circling each other and sizing each other up and deciding how far they want to take it and when.
Very early on, you brought up the No Country for Old Men comparison, and I think this fits. I think that Hamilton is stuck. He's sitting there watching TV as is planned in his retirement, doesn't have many people to outsmart anymore, doesn't have, his partner to rib or ask him about how it's going at work, his past and stuff. He's just sort of exists. He's a old man in a place where he doesn't really have anything left. And I think similarly, Toby is like all sad in his little house, all modest, without oil money, and just kind of what's the root of his existence now? He doesn't have his mom. He doesn't have his brother. He definitely doesn't have a wife. Maybe he'll enjoy some level of relationship with his kids now that he's made them fabulously wealthy. But it's very anticlimactic and sad in a way that I figure living in West Texas would be.
Well, he can help his son with his homework, and he can kind of live with the satisfaction knowing that he did better than the generation before him, perhaps. I mean, wasn't Toby expecting not to make it through this? There was some comment between the brothers early on where he says something to the effect of, why are you acting like we're going to make it through this? Or something like that. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Right. So Toby said to Tanner, you act like we're not going to get away with this. And Tanner said, I've never met anyone who got away with anything. You? So he kind of knew that he was there for his brother. Tanner knew he wasn't there for his mom, wasn't wanted to be there for his mom, doesn't have family, has his brother. So when his little brother says, I need to ask you to do something, you can't ever ask me about it later, and we're going to hurt some people. He's like, whose car are we going to take? The town, that was a quote from The Town. He's there, and that's his purpose. Right? And Toby's purpose is only his kids. And as sad as he is about Tanner going out like that, he knows that Tanner died for that stack of chips that he pulls close to him. And really the only thing that matters is his boys. His boys who would have been fine anyway, but he's trying to break in the most extreme way possible this generational cycle of abuse and poverty and all the things that come with that.
Right. He says poverty is like a disease.
Yeah. Steers clear of his kids. He's like, that was a year ago, Tanner says, since he's seen them. Isn't trying to reconcile with the wife. He just figures he's bad, his brother is bad, and the best case scenario is to let them be their own kind of, splinter off from the family tree and try not to be affected by all that.
So Tanner, you believe, always planned to go out in a blaze of glory?
I think that there was enough on both sides so that it was possible that either Tanner or Toby would die. I mean, Toby didn't have the reason to live other than to satisfy the reverse mortgage and pay off the loan to the bank. Once his kid's future was secure, he would have fulfilled his purpose in life. Tanner, I think that was a foregone conclusion, but it was also possible that either of the Marshalls would have died. I mean, they talked, maybe I'll go out in a blaze of glory and it'll save me having to figure out what to do with my retirement. And at the same time, Alberto was talking about retiring on his boat. And you're like, ooh. I mean, I'm not going to say that tipped off the fact that he was going to die. But
of course it did.
But someone was. So did you think, wasn't Alberto, because they were both so well positioned to kind of die. Were you shocked when he was unceremoniously blown away? Just like all of a sudden, he's like, why don't you go up behind him and tomahawk him or something? And by that time, he was already dead. His partner was already dead. That wasn't a shock to you?
Oh, such a shock. And because it was so seemingly random and unprovoked, it seemed all the more real and shocking.
And yet, it was important that Tanner have some level of efficacy. He's the one that got the posse off their tail with that remarkable burst of automatic gunfire with the AR-15. Like, he stopped. I was like, how are they going to get out of this? And then he stopped all those boys cold in their tracks. But I think that Tanner earned some level of revenge or redemption, even if he was never going to make it out alive. It seemed obvious.
Why? Because he saved his brother?
He deliberately sacrificed himself. So that leads me to this question. Remember, we discussed in Civil War when a certain character was having a distinctly human moment, and that seemed to foretell that person's demise.
Right.
It seemed clear that Tanner was going to his just desserts in service of making sure that when the post bank robbery completely went to hell, that someone was going to have to go to prison. Ben. Oh, get it?
Well,
Prison Ben? Like that was from National Treasure, but his name is Ben Foster.
No. I get it, but... So they've already shaken the posse and pulled over, and the clean car is waiting. Like, Tanner has an out, which he chooses not to take. Yeah, he does divert them after. I forget the mechanics exactly of the chase. But it seemed like it was his predilection and not necessary for Tanner to go out the way they did. And it's pretty spectacular. Like when he bails from the truck with the lit gas tank.
Yeah.
Did he premeditate that?
Oh, well, he had a tank of kerosene, so that seemed pretty like, hey, good timing. But I don't know. He also had the AR-15, and he had, the wherewithal to say, you take it, you go, to sacrifice himself. I think he knew that there was hell to pay. And honestly, every time that this movie swerved off course, or particularly off of Toby's plan, was obviously because of Tanner. When they hit the non-Texas Midlands Bank, and so that they had the robbery on videotape, and they determined that it was just him, and then when he insisted that they go to post in robbing the other branch, the other bank, that allowed for them to get descriptions of them at the diner. And he changes the whole plan to post, which really goes badly. And I think he knew that he had kind of caused that. And frankly, that people were on them. There were going to be roadblocks. And the two of them together, that was just a death sentence, pulling up to a traffic stop. But if it's just him with the money in a different car, and it was clear that he could draw them away in the shot up truck, maybe his brother would have a chance to punch through.
Make this new school year an opportunity for your kids to learn important life skills with Greenlight. Greenlight is a debit card and money app for families where kids learn how to save, invest, and spend wisely, while parents keep an eye on kids' money habits. Greenlight also helps families get into their fall routine with a chores feature that lets parents assign chores and pay kids allowance when they check them off. Get your first month free at greenlight.com/Spotify. Greenlight.com/Spotify.
Life is hard, but finding a really great podcast makes the days go by so much easier. Hi, my name is Blue Telusma. I'm a writer, an emotional intelligence coach, and the host of Humanize with Blue Telusma, a podcast where we believe that when you humanize everyone in the room, a great conversation is almost guaranteed. Join us every week here on Electricast as me and my guest co-hosts unpack big topics and interview even bigger personalities with a sense of humor and a dash of mischief. If you're looking for a new best friend in your head, we've got you covered. Electricast.
Jeff Bridges kept calling Ben Foster, kept calling Tanner dim-witted. And I think he was anything but. I just think his motivations and his devil-may-care, his carelessness and recklessness was going to be enough to trip him up no matter what.
But doesn't Marcus say that, Tanner does this because he likes it?
Yeah.
He kills people because he likes it.
I think he was trying to provoke Toby.
But I don't think he didn't believe it.
No, for sure. It was for our benefit, but also he was there kind of talking about how stupid his brother was and how trigger-happy his brother was in order to get Toby to reveal himself.
Right, which he essentially does. I mean, just shy of does. They're in a stalemate, but Toby's speaking pretty plainly. Nothing incriminating, but he's also not outright denying it. Maybe there's a certain level of relief that comes from being able to face his brother's killer head on and to know that maybe it's not done. I think an interesting aspect to Hell or High Water is the moment in time that we're dropped into. We don't exactly know what was the rift, between Toby and his wife and what broke up the family. We don't know when they kind of hatched this plan. We're just dropped right into the beginning of it. And likewise, we don't exactly know where he's going to go, but we know that there's an unsettled score between Toby and Marcus. And those things aren't necessary to know for the story that the filmmakers want to tell.
It feels untidy and it feels unresolved. And in that way, the story is tight and there's no frills, there's no fat, there's no like him secretly leaving an envelope, clandestinely leaving an envelope of money on Ranger Alberto's family's porch, or anything like that. There's no atonement. He is responsible for the deaths of 4 people. Even, just by association, he had a gun, and I think he fired some shots, albeit in not intending to kill when he was in the post branch. But Toby is culpable for sure. And I really like those aspects where you're not really sure. But I was pretty sure that he was going to succeed in his goal. I wasn't sure ultimately how in service Tanner would be of that goal, because he kept trying to muck it up but he can't help himself. So going back to the Civil War thing, at what point did you know for sure, or did you highly suspect that Tanner, the Ben Foster character, was going to die? Did he have a human moment? Because I was watching for that, and I'm pretty sure, well, I know what it was for me anyway.
The earliest I knew for sure was at the side of the road.
Yeah.
Which was obvious. But maybe before then it was the brothers roughhousing at sunset. At that moment I kind of knew they were fulfilling their role to each other, and it was kind of 50-50 who was going to go.
Yep. Strangely, after he seriously mucked it up for Toby at the casino with his lady friend.
Mucked it up? You mean saved him?
Well, that's the question. Was that lady, in fact, a hooker?
Oh, yes.
Yeah?
She was definitely a hooker, and then Tanner takes it to the next level because apparently he knows this world, and he lays it out. He lays out her plan. She was going to slip him a drug, have her pimp rob him. The whole thing was all planned out.
Oh, yeah? 100%?
I mean, yeah. Why do you doubt it? Do you think she was just a nice lady? How dare you? She's a nice lady.
Well, then that means that Toby was a little bit gullible, right? Or innocent or whatever.
No. You're totally misreading the situation. Toby was just in an emotional state where he needed comfort. And he was vulnerable. And maybe he might have done something stupid. Maybe.
And thus you will not be surprised when I tell you that Melanie Papalia is in fact credited as hooker.
That does not surprise me. No, not one iota.
Now, strangely, I get it. The horsing around moment where they're kind of reconnecting as brothers, or the yaw moment in the car. He's so contrary to Toby's plan. You're like, why is he keeping Tanner around? He must have been out of his mind to ask him for help. And then when Tanner charms the concierge lady.
What?
And then bones her.
In the bed next to his brother?
Yeah, super awkward. For whatever reason, I identified that as the human moment where I was like, oh, Tanner got some. He's definitely going to die.
He's fulfilled his purpose?
Yeah, kind of.
I mean, I believed that Melanie so-and-so was a hooker, but I did not believe that Tanner Howard was a Casanova. And that came as a complete surprise and shock to me that he was able to bag that receptionist, and that he had his own way with women despite not having his brother's good looks.
Yeah. Ben Foster, in his own way, he's thinning a little bit, and he could use a shave and a wash, but not a bad-looking dude. He was an angelic, blue-eyed X-Man. And definitely he plays a much rougher. I mean, Chris Pine looks pretty rough and sweaty and gross in this movie. Obviously, he's a big cutie or whatever, but they both have their, brotherly. I'm not sure if that resemblance is strong enough, but I bought it. But it was clear that from the descriptions of the guys in the diner, it wasn't very specific. One was tall and one was short, and that was kind of it. But they're both good-looking guys or whatever. So much so that Chris Pine gets hit on a number of times. But I wonder if it was true, because the wife Debbie, they obviously had problems where she said at every turn, ex-wife, and she didn't want him around, and she was so cold and mean to him.
Just like he likes it.
Right? You like him miserable or whatever. But but she did soften a little bit when he told her about his mom. Well, she was like, good riddance, no offense. But then she asked him if he was okay. She consented to having him around to visit, to see the son, to then fix up the house. Do you think it was all because he gave her untold thousands of dollars in back child support? Here's the money I owe you. And do you think she was so mean and cold because he wasn't paying her anything, because they couldn't even afford to feed the horses when his mom died or see the sons in a year? And then I think it was better, although they were never going to get back together. I think she was only mean because he wasn't living up to his responsibilities, i.e. child support.
Yeah, there was definitely some baggage there, but the wad of cash definitely helped to grease the wheels between the two of them and get them talking again.
What happened to their marriage wasn't unforgivable. Like, he wasn't as bad as his brother.
His troublemaking, prison-going brother. Yeah, I mean, she's just weary and a single mom who knows how she's piecing it together. Doesn't have support of her deadbeat husband, who probably, to her surprise, comes through for her kids. Where that came from, or if that was a change in Toby's character, maybe that was a resolve that he developed, during his mother's sickness or after her death. We just don't know. But we see him execute his plan to a T. We see him standing outside the house with a shotgun as the family comes home. Why is he patrolling the grounds with a shotgun? Is that just his role now, that he's the protector of his family, even if they don't want him?
Well, he fully told his kid, you're going to be hearing things, because he didn't expect to get away with it alive, at least not the both of them, right? Don't be like us, and etc. So he knew the likelihood of him going down. It didn't matter. Once the trust was secured, then his job was done, and he would have accepted whatever his punishment was for those misdeeds. But he also knew that he was obviously going to be a suspect, given that he was Tanner's brother, and that Marcus was going to show up. And so I'm guessing he went to the farm where he didn't live, intending to do some repairs around the house or whatever, with a rifle until Marcus showed up, which he did, or until somebody showed up. Because he wasn't above suspicion, despite what Margaret said. He was the only person, which leads me to another question. Yes, he punched through, but yes, everybody will say, except for the one-off non-Texas Midlands bank, that it was always two guys. It's supposed to be two of them, up on the ridge and all that. If Toby got stopped and they ran a background check, and this is 2016 Texas, and he was far away from home. He was all the way to Post. Would they not have logged that check? Yes, Tanner's brother was in fact in the area at the time and went through a traffic stop. They were going to come for him at some point, even if they couldn't pin it on him specifically via evidence. But I think he knew that, yes, in fact, it was never going to be over, at least as far as Marcus is concerned. Because they weren't pursuing him. He is not a suspect, and you are retired. But none of that mattered to Marcus, because he had nothing left. Because Toby had nothing left that they were going to kind of square off until one of them died. And it was also in that way tangible and felt real, in that they weren't cheating so much. It wasn't like he got off scot-free and everything was fine, or he had some kind of moral redemption. It just is what it is.
Yeah, I guess you got to get subpoenas or warrants or whatever in order to check cell phone tower pings. But you'd think that they could pinpoint his location around the time of all the shenanigans. So, yeah, that's reasonable. But that's a different kind of realism, where when you're out of the movie, where you start to look for or find the cracks. You seem... And I was definitely immersed in this movie. I mean, you obviously like the movie. You like Taylor Sheridan's work. Interesting to note that on IMDb, Hell or High Water is a 7.6 as compared to a 7.7 for Sicario. So the general public may disagree with you there. I don't feel like Hell or High Water was particularly well received or talked about in 2016. It has this weird CBS Films credit at the top. And you're like, what kind of movie is this? And now in 2024, Taylor Sheridan is obviously a force to be reckoned with. And a lot of this cast he's taken on to Yellowstone, and it's a fabulous cast with fabulous performances. It's interesting that you've kind of glommed onto this movie, which I feel like is really under the radar.
It's a Texas movie.
A Texas movie, and also No Country for Men light, right? It treads all the same territory. It's a fine line between homage and retreading. And I think the argument can be made that this is a more tired, albeit different, retread of a movie that's just unparalleled.
I mean, maybe tropes-wise, some of these things were present. I do think that there was some joy and variety in the casting and the interplay of these characters that I found delightful. But I think what you're trying to say in a roundabout way is this is kind of my type of movie, and that's why I glommed onto it. It is worth noting that David Mackenzie, who in fact directed this movie that Taylor Sheridan wrote, didn't do a dang thing other than this that I know. And it's not perfect, which is probably why I didn't gush over it initially and be like, we have to discuss this. But this is kind of an under-the-radar, surprising one that's worked its way into heavy rotation for me.
And look, I think that I understand that. I'm in this place right now. I don't want to take a risk on a movie that's going to be lame or that I don't like. I want to watch a movie that's going to be comforting. And for some reason recently, this just popped in my head. And I was like, yeah, that's what I want to watch. And this was based on one viewing. I've only seen this movie twice. But there was something about the first time that stuck. And I think that the same can be said for you. And so, is this a totally?
I'm going to give this movie a totally. Like I said, it does have its problems, and sometimes it rings false to me in a way that I can't quite explain. I wouldn't say it's heavy-handed. I just think that tonally it's a touch askew at times. I mean, was it heavy-handed to have Taylor Sheridan, by the way, playing the role of the cowboy of the wildfire that was supposedly Texas Midlands Bank, driving these poor cowboys to desperation? By pushing them off their land, quite literally, this fire that they experienced. That was kind of heavy-handed symbolism, right? But the waitress in the restaurant, I think these are the moments that maybe save this from being an ultimate classic.
Really?
Yeah, the waitress is unrealistic. She says she worked there for over 40 years. But why would they even have a menu if nobody ever orders anything except T-bone steak with a baked potato, medium rare, and an iced tea? We don't serve no goddamn trout. Like, it's funny and all, but it wasn't quite real.
That's when you know they're reaching for the Coen Brothers level comedy that doesn't quite fit in.
There were a couple of moments that I thought were strange, but overall I'm filled with admiration for this movie and movies of this type that don't really flinch, that are not neat and tidy. And again, not overly complicated as the story go, but it felt like a sort of good old boys really doing what they felt was right, even if it wasn't considered right by societal standards. Was Toby a bad guy? He certainly could have killed people. A lot of gray area, but I enjoy it every time I watch it.
I think something about Hell or High Water, you either let it in or you don't. And that's our discussion on Hell or High Water, available on Peacock. 818-835-0473 or orwhatevermovies@gmail.com. Thank you for listening in. We'll see you next time.
Hey there, fabulous souls. I'm Stephanie Baklaan.
And I'm Eden Alpert.
And we're the hosts of the brand new podcast, Unapologetically Fab.
Get ready to join us on an amazing and real journey as we dive into life after 40 and own it.
We're all about changing the narrative, leaning into who you are, and living a life by your own design.
Join us as we embrace life unapologetically and redefine success.
This is Unapologetically Fab,
an Electric Cast production.
See you there.
Electricast.
Ever thought about starting your own podcast?
Do you have a business or a message you want to share with the world?
Well, now it's easier than ever with Electricast. Hi, I'm Mark Netter.
And I'm Peter Rafelson. We're the founders of Electricast Media.
Whether you want to start a new podcast or already have one, join Electricast to grow your audience, monetize your content, and build your community.
With our simple sign-up, you get free promotion, world-class analytics, premium ads, and personal support.
Go to electricast.com and join our community today.
Electricast. Transform your influence.
Electricast. Electricast.